At 8 years old, Daniel was told to pack a suitcase and say goodbye to his home. His younger sister stayed. He was sent to live with an aunt in another state. The explanation was simple. He was unstable, too angry, too difficult to raise. That was the story everyone repeated. That was the story he carried into adulthood. For 27 years, he believed he had been the problem. Until one night, standing in a dark hallway outside the dining room, he heard his parents say something that didn't match the version he'd lived with his entire life. He was the only way to fix it. Daniel froze. The light above the table was dim. A manila envelope lay open between them. His name was printed across the top of a document inside. Permanent guardianship transfer. Filed 3 weeks before the incident, they always said forced their decision. 3 weeks before the anger. 3 weeks before the excuse. Some family decisions aren't emotional, they're strategic. And some children aren't removed because they're unlovable, but because they're legally convenient. If you're drawn to the stories families never say out loud, you can subscribe quietly. This space exists for them. How do parents justify sacrificing one child to protect themselves? Daniel was about to find out that the silence he carried for decades never belonged to him. He had spent decades believing he was volatile, too unpredictable, too hard to manage. But nothing in their tone that night sounded like frustration. It sounded like calculation. When the doorbell rang, both parents stepped away from the table. Daniel waited 3 seconds before walking into the dining room. The envelope was still open. Inside was a photocopy of an old custody agreement signed by both parents. His name was printed clearly at the top. Permanent guardianship transfer. He read the date twice. It had been filed 3 weeks before the incident they always said forced their decision. 3 weeks before the school suspension. 3 weeks before the anger problem. The timeline no longer aligned. He slid the paper back into place and returned to the hallway. Dinner proceeded as if nothing had shifted. His sister talked about work. His father avoided his eyes. His mother kept watching him too carefully. Daniel said very little. Later, when the house quieted, he passed the hallway again. The voices were lower now. "It would have destroyed everything," his father said. "We protected what we could," his mother replied. Protected what? Not who. What? Daniel pressed his palm against the wall. The sentence settled in slowly. The next morning he drove to the county records office. The clerk retrieved archived filings from the year of the agreement. There had been an investigation into his father's construction company, potential financial misconduct, possible asset seizure. He requested copies. Among the documents was a filing referencing dependent liability exposure. The agreement had been submitted days before the financial review intensified. He sat in his car afterward, engine off, staring at the papers in his lap. If he was no longer a dependent under that roof, certain protections shifted. Certain liabilities narrowed. Certain assets were shielded. He returned to the house that evening. The envelope was still there. This time he opened it in front of them. His father didn't stop him. His mother didn't speak. Daniel placed the county record beside the custody agreement. The dates lined up. "So it wasn't about me," he said. His father inhaled slowly. "We were trying to survive," he answered. The sentence didn't contain apology. It contained explanation. Silence stretched across the table. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He only asked, "Did you ever plan to tell me?" His mother's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "We thought you'd move on," she said quietly. Move on from what he didn't understand. Weeks passed before his mother called him. She asked to meet at a small cafe halfway between their homes. She brought the original envelope this time. Not a copy. The original. Her hands rested on it for a moment before sliding it toward him. He opened it slowly. The envelope contained the original custody agreement filed to reduce financial liability during the asset investigation. There was a handwritten note in the margin, his father's writing. Temporary solution until review clears. Temporary. It had lasted decades. His mother didn't defend the decision. "We were afraid," she said, "and we chose what felt safest." Safest for them. Daniel nodded. Not because he agreed, not because it erased anything, but because the story finally matched reality. He had not been too angry. He had not been too unstable. He had simply been legally expendable. He didn't demand repayment for lost birthdays. He didn't ask for public confession. He didn't threaten distance. He left the cafe quietly. In the weeks that followed, he visited occasionally. Conversations were careful, measured. His parents didn't revisit the explanation unless he did. But something had shifted. The silence no longer belonged to him. It belonged to them. The house still had the same dining table. The hallway still carried sound the same way. But now, when he walked through it, he understood what had happened there. Not an emotional collapse, a strategic decision. He had been removed to protect assets, to protect reputation, to protect stability. He had not been removed because he was unlovable. Justice did not arrive as punishment. It arrived as clarity. His parents' fear did not excuse their choice, but it explained it. And explanation after decades of distortion felt heavier than anger. The story they told the world had been easier. The story they told him had been simpler. The truth had been financial, calculated, silent. How do parents justify sacrificing one child to protect themselves? Daniel never received a perfect answer, but he finally stopped carrying the wrong one.